In 1999, I was 22 and I had just graduated from Emerson University in downtown Boston, majoring in screenwriting, especially in cartoons and children's programming. My depth was pretty bad, so when Nickelodeon Studios offered me an internship at the studio in California, I accepted it immediately. I jumped at the chance to get away from that dead end job at Benjamin Franklin Tour Guide. Many, many of you may ask about see Crybaby Lane, but if you want to see the original Crybaby Lane, you will never will. Even if Nickelodeon somehow consents in releasing it to you, you won't be seeing it what is shown on TV, and you sure as fuck won't be seeing the original that Lure made. I didn't even think that Nickelodeon has the original cut from the movie anymore. And if they do, it's only backup copies. If the backup copies exist, they must be locked away in some vault, along with the deleted episodes of Ren and Stimpy, and never before mentioned episodes of SpongeBob SquarePants. I'm pretty sure that the director, Peter Lorre, has the copy, and probably in his mantle next to his snuff films, such as that creepy ass shit. Anyway, I was hired in 1999 and immediately was put on the creative production for the team that made the movie Crybaby Lane. That would be almost a year before the movie was due to the broadcast. All in fact, it was pretty low effort kind of thing. There were only 4 people on the creative team. I was only the studied one. Lure would replace them with him, and he said it was fresh to keep. I thought of it too because he was hiding something, and I was right. We had a little over a year to have done what made of the TV movie, not just to write it and cast it, but to film it and get it edited. Lure didn't work fast at all. After the fast 3 weeks, we only had ideas for the first 15 minutes of the 85-minute movie. Lure, even at this point, was a weirdo. He was tall and lanky, and he carried himself awkwardly. He stuttered when he talked, and sometimes, when you were hunched over like a piece of paper during those endless brainstorming sessions, you look up and you catch him staring at you, smiling. He'd look away when you caught his eye, and I guess that was the creepiest part. He always looked like he was about to hide something. The brainstorm sessions at first were all right. We got the premise of down pat. 2 brothers unleashed a demon and they got into mischief and trying to free anything back to normal. Not exactly daytime Emmy stuff, but you know. It was an alright start. I thought the movie should be pretty goofy and spooky, like kind of Courage the Cowardly Dog sort of deal. However, from the very beginning, Lure made it clear that he wanted the film to be as scary as possible. He didn't want to be cheap thrills with a good wholesome ending. He wanted to push farther than Are You Afraid of the Dark ever dreamed of, and I guess he did. It was about 5 weeks into the production when I noticed something. Lure had the absolute power of the persuasion over everyone else in the creative production team. No one fought him in by the 3rd week and was already suggesting some morbid things. I remember he said he wanted a little brother to die halfway through the movie, getting hit with by a dump truck. I immediately shot that down. It was the only one who said anything, and it stayed like that way until I left the studio entirely and never came back. First, cannibalism and other fucked up shit was meant to keep jokes and tasteless comments about, but as time went on, it became more and more overt. I gave him an idea, which most of the time would end up using, like, how would the movie start with a morbid undertaker who reads them stories, to which he replied, yeah, and then he can cut them up into pieces and force-fed them to his dog. He made those jokes a few times in the early stages, and then he got serious. He would stand up like he was Jesus or something, cleared his throat loudly, and proclaimed his idea. I'd be the only one to shoot it down. Everything, every frickin' time. One day near the end of our brainstorming sessions, Lure cleared up and stood. We all fell silent and looked at him. We would normally would, and he stood up and said, Gentlemen and females, I have an idea. I remember what he did. He paused, looked right at me and said, The story will revolve around the legend of a pair of Siamese twins. Have you ever heard of the Donor Party? Everyone nodded, except for me. I didn't like where that conversation was going. They ate themselves when it got cold. They ate each other. Everyone once again nodded, and I closed my eyes. That would be the Siamese twins. What would they do if they've got nothing to eat? One would wait until the other twin dies and then consume their own sister's flesh. They would claw at each other's eyes until one of them died, and then dine them upon the vulture tearing the skin of a dead deer. I don't know. It's kinda interesting indeed. And I didn't know what the fuck I was hearing. I opened my eyes and looked around the room. No one was frickin' moving. Everyone's eyes were on Laura except for mine. And when I looked at him, he was still staring at me. Children like violence. They reveal it. Children like to be scared. So we'll scare them, won't we, Johnny? He leaned over the table, getting pretty damn close to my face. His breath smelled like decaying shit. I stared back at him. I think you're messed up, to be honest. He surprised and then smiled and backed away. Oh, I'm messed up all right, but you have to be messed up to survive this cutthroat world. He grinned expanded. Literally right now, I'm going to show you some pictures that will spark off some of your imaginations. He got up and locked the door to the inside. I stood up and said, What the hell are you doing? Let's not make any errors in judgment, Jonathan. Sit down. No. Sit. For some reason I did, and Laura pulled out one of those shitty overhead projectors. He turned on the switch, and shouted, an unusually high and semi-frantic voice. This is a freaking muse. We must continue with this pro-freaking-duction. This is what every child should see. His eyes bulged in his head. He put the image down on the glass surface of the overhead. It was silent. The image in black and white was grainy, but I could vaguely make out a boy laying on a brick floor with his arms cut off and his bloody like nub black spots. The only thing that was clear was his face. He was bleeding from his mouth. Lure almost threw the paper off the overhead, slamming down another one. It was a zoomed-in shot of the boy's face. It was in color. The blood trickled down from his open mouth onto the brick floor. His eyes shut, grimly blood underneath his eyebrows and eyelashes. Then his eyes opened, and I screamed. No one else in the frickin' room did, and it died in infancy, and shrillness ringing in the air. The pupils were completely black. The rest of the eye was normal. I no longer stared. The more the eyes opened, widening and widening until it looked like the skin above his eyebrows and eye sockets were going to rip in half. And then they started to bleed. Blood was starting to trickle, and I swear to God I could hear it. More. Now it has gone into a full-blown stream. More and more until the brick wall it was a lake of blood. I could hear it. Like I was hiking and came across a stream, and now I could smell the kid. I could frickin' smell his rot. I leaned underneath the table and vomited. When I rose back up, those images were gone. Everyone else in the room was expressionless. Laura turned on the lights. You may go, he said, unlocking the door. I walked through those doors and never came back. This happened near the end of the brainstorming process. By the time I left, the casting was done and the script was almost fully written. They were desperately behind the schedule. I think Lure planned it so it to be like it wouldn't be for proper editing. I watched the real thing when it aired, but I heard from a friend who was working at the editing department that they had a good cut of 15-20 minutes of disturbing footage from the film before it was fit to release. And it was only fit to release. They didn't have enough time to double check the footage frame by frame. I guess this is when he got his wish, unless they cut every single scene that had pictures in them. Every child watching Crybaby Lane was on conscious memory of those pictures. As I weep for them, I really do. They messed me up. As I write this to you, it'll be the last thing I'll ever write before I slit my throat, before blood splatters all over the frickin' computer screen. There is something I should tell you first, though. Early on, Laura posted the idea of two brothers capturing a squirrel, putting the squirrel in the jar, and slowly drowning it before filling the jar with sand and dropping it to the bottom of the pond. Soon after this was suggested, Sandy from SpongeBob SquarePants appeared in Tea at the Tree Dome. Laura also suggested one scene for the movie, for a man, a squid-like nose, to take off his pants in front of the two boys and, well, do something really messed up off camera, but heavily implies Squidward soon appeared to be a major character in SpongeBob SquarePants. It was also suggested that the boys to be two stepbrothers, forced to live in the same house after the one's first mom was found dead in the shallow grave, and her body heavily cannibalized by her own husband, a local weatherman. This show with vaguely premise Drake and Josh started in 2004, and the stepfather is indeed a weatherman. Lure also suggested the younger brother to have a dog-like house in which he keeps his various animal fetuses encased in acid that regularly uses poison to have his mother goes with at it with his abusive stepfather. As told by Ginger, debuted soon after. A man who captures the soul of the children in a vacuum cleaner sends them to Hades, Danny Phantom. A robot who goes insane kills two of the brothers. One of them wears the skin, pretending to be a brother in high school. My life as a teenage robot. The list goes on and on. Nickelodeon knows, and they're continuing the legacy of Lure, sometimes stubbly and sometimes overly. And there's nothing you can do or I can do about it. Do you want to see it? You got it.